Hello, everyone. Welcome to season 2 of Fundraising Conversations and this first opening episode, Stepping Up for Women and Gender Equality in Europe. And let me welcome my guest, Nadège Lharaig from the Alliance of Gender Equality in Europe. Hello, Nadège.
Hi, Lina.
Hi, thank you so much for being here with us. How are you today?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm good. What about you?
So, let's jump right in and please tell us, who is the Alliance of Gender Equality in Europe and why have these foundations come together?
Yes, sure. So the Alliance for Gender Equality in Europe is a new donors collaborative that was created in 2021 to support women's rights and gender equality in Europe. So it has been created based on the assessment that there is a lack of funding for gender equality in the region, both public and private funding, and to contribute to bridging that gap. So to finance small organizations that usually fall through the cracks of this funding, and also as foundation to collaborate together to achieve a greater impact on an issue that nobody can solve alone, namely gender equality. So currently we have 5 members, the Bodossaki Foundation, Fondation Chanel, King Baudouin Foundation, JPMorgan Chase, and Laurel Fund for Women.
Okay, so wonderful pot of money to be spent on frontline organizations, as I understand, that work for gender equality and women's rights in Europe. And could you tell us a little bit about how you are approaching gender equality, and also what is your philosophy of work with these organizations?
Yeah, so we have an approach of gender equality that is holistic, intersectional, and inclusive. So by holistic, we mean that we are looking at addressing individual empowerment, but also the underlying systems of oppression. For us, these different actions go together to drive change and improve gender equality. We are also having an intersectional approach, so meaning that we target the most vulnerable people in terms of gender inequality. So people who are experiencing diverse discrimination and oppression within the region. And we also have an inclusive approach where we include LGBTQI people, especially those from other minoritized genders, so namely transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. And how we work with organizations, so we provide grants and capacity building, and how we do that, we try to support long-term structural issues such as, gender-based violence, access to economic opportunities. We are also funding across the European Union and the United Kingdom, stressing that there is a need to improve gender equality in every country because no country has achieved it yet.
Indeed. Unfortunately.
Yeah. And also trying to have processes that are adapted to the organization we target. So to streamline also our processes and to trying and striving to be more trust-based, supporting with core funding, and being really a partner rather than having, a vertical relationship of a donor and a grantee.
Great. And I have lots of questions coming up already based on this explanation. But as you know, we are doing this as a capacity building for nonprofits. And I think the first thing to get out of this is that when we are writing, responding to call for proposals, we do want to understand really, really well how the funder or the group of funders, as in case of the Alliance, are defining the issues and are defining the target groups, and that was really helpful. So let's move on and talk about the actual calls for proposals that you have already launched. And the first one was in 2021, and that was a COVID Solidarity Fund. And just now we have come out with a 2023 Economic Opportunities Fund. Can you talk us through this funding, please?
Yeah, sure. So maybe you can put the slides so they can have all the basic information. So the objective of this call for proposal is to drive impactful and sustainable community-driven solution that promote economic opportunities for the target group I mentioned before. So women, transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. We have 3.5 million to be distributed via this call, and we are looking at providing 2 years grants in core funding or project funding, with the funding ranging from 60,000 euro to 150,000 euro. So the deadline for the first phase of the application is the 12th of February. And maybe I will explain a bit later how the whole selection process will go. But these are the basic information.
Okay, that's perfect. And obviously, more information is available on the website of the Alliance for those of you who haven't seen the call. But what I wanted to ask right now is actually this question of economic opportunities, because there is so much, and especially when we talk about marginalized groups, that can prevent women to be on the labor market and to be, or that are barriers to entrepreneurship. And there is so many systemic issues, then I'm wondering, how do you even put a line, that this is an economic opportunity and this isn't, because this is such an interlinked universe. And then, of course, for people who are here, and I see there's 32 people watching us live, and perhaps even more planning to apply, they will be asking themselves this question, like, this is what I'm doing. Is this close enough to economic opportunities? Is this close enough to the labor market? So what is the thinking of the Alliance on that?
Yeah, sure. So you will see it in the text of the call for proposal, but we have put up a definition of economic opportunities that state the opening up of job, entrepreneurship, and financial opportunities to previously underserved social groups. We also acknowledge that some factors will have an accelerator role, so that will improve the chances of economic opportunities, such as education, training and skills, public services and infrastructure, careers and income level, financial independence, affordable housing and social networks, and some other factors that may be barriers to have accessing economic opportunities, such as gender and racial stereotypes, occupational segregation, physical and mental health, and caretaking responsibilities, for example. So this is the definition we have set up in the call. Of course, as you mentioned, there's many different perspectives on the topic, and we are operating in a very broad region, being the European Union and the UK, where you have many different economic situation and contexts. So we are also open to, listening to the field and organization. If they have an alternative definition of economic opportunities, we can also be flexible with that, because we acknowledge that we don't know everything about it, and that organizations on the ground are also the experts in what they do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is great news for those who perhaps would like to enter a dialogue with you and would like to present to you what they do to see whether perhaps you can support it. So let's go and discuss now the actual process of the application. I understand that this is a 2-stage proposal. So can you give us a little bit details of it and what's going to happen once you receive the first applications?
Yeah, sure. So indeed, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to streamline our processes and make them, accessible for the small and medium-sized frontline organization we want to fund. So the first stage is a very short concept note and some question to assess the eligibility of the organization, where applicants, should explain broadly what they aim to do with this proposal, and how they aim to implement the activities they want to implement, and how does that fit broadly in our call for proposal. So once we will receive this first application, the Alliance team will review them and do a pre-selection based on eligibility and already the selection criteria that we have set in the call. And then we will invite a selected number of applicants, around 40 or 50, to go to the second stage of the application process, where organization will have to fill out a more detailed proposal that are answering all the selection criteria. Once we receive this second stage application, we will work with an external selection committee made of external experts coming from civil society organization, philanthropic organization, academia, and all having an expertise on gender equality, on economic opportunities, and in Europe. And they will make a recommendation on which organization should be funded. And finally, the final stage will be the steering committee of the Alliance. So all the foundations that I mentioned at the beginning that are our member will make the final granting decision, so approving the selection committee recommendation.
Okay, well, thank you for this explanation. And those of you who are watching live, if you have any questions to Nadège about the Alliance or about the current call for proposals or anything that we're saying here, please write them in the chat so that we can see them, and we will try to answer them as they are coming up. And in the meantime, whilst I'm waiting for your questions, I'm going to ask some of my questions. And one of the most important questions that I think every nonprofit is asking themselves is, how do I make my proposal stand out to you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think there are several aspects that are important. First, very basic, but to read the call for proposal very thoroughly. Make sure that you match the eligibility criteria, because these are mandatory criteria. Then we have set out, several selection.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to mention, it is predominantly the location and the fact that you are a registered nonprofit, right?
Yes, exactly. It's about the type of organization that you are. So a non-registered nonprofit, the size of your organization, and the location, because we have selected, I think it's 17 countries across the region that we are targeting. Mm-hmm. So this is all mandatory. Once you have passed this mandatory step, we have also listed some selection criteria, and you can have a look. But basically, what's very important, as I mentioned, is really to have a clear context and problem analysis and understanding of what's your issue, and make a compelling case about that. Also, obviously, we are the Alliance for Gender Equality in Europe, so a very strong vision about gender equality. How do you understand that? How do you approach that? This call is on economic opportunities, so we want to look at your impact on economic opportunities. As I mentioned, we're looking at, we have a framework where we mix individual empowerment with challenging, more systemic issues. So this should also be reflected in the strong proposal that we would receive. How do you mix the individual empowerment approach with a more reasoning on system of oppression and domination? Also, your proposal should be adapted to your capacity. So we're not looking, at quantity, but rather at the quality of what you want to do, and how it also fits with the organization that you are. And the last point is the willingness also to build organizational development, because the applicant who will, the grantees that we will fund would benefit from a capacity building program from us, that we want to have it needs-based and useful, but still there should be also a willingness to engage in such activities.
Okay, so this is a lot to sort of capture as well in a two-stage application. And then what is really important in the first stage, and then what is important in the second stage? So how do we make a difference between the two?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to mention that a couple of people have sent in their questions about where are the details of the calls for proposals. So here is the link, and please go to the website of the Alliance. All the details are there. But if you would like to ask anything that isn't there, or perhaps, you know, query Nadège for more details, please don't hesitate to send in more questions.
Yeah. Great. So for the difference between the two stages, as I mentioned, the first stage is really a concept note. So you don't have to go into great lengths, you know, and explain everything that you would do. Here, the important thing is to really, you know, summarize what is it you want to achieve. So really looking at your objectives or your impact, and how you plan to do that. You should be concise and very straight to the point. So yeah, it should be really easy for us to understand in a very limited note what you want to achieve. Then if you go to the second stage, you will have more time to explain, you know, about what type, more in detail about your impact, more in detail about the type of organization that you are, who you are supporting, how you include the people you support, how you approach gender equality, how you intend to have an impact on gender equality as well, and also explain, you know, a bit more about your organization, what you would like to do as organizational development if you have already some ideas.
Okay. Let me just put that up. Voila. Second stage. So first stage, really a summary of what the organization would like to do, who they are, a brief introduction, and then the second stage, go into more details and show how you are really responding to the concerns and objectives of the call and of the Alliance.
Yeah, and one last thing I didn't mention about the budget. So in the first stage, we are only asking for, you know, an amount that you would like the Alliance to fund. And then in the second stage, we will ask you for a more detailed budget of, you know, listing all the budget lines that you want the Alliance to fund.
Okay, and this is also interesting for me because I would like to know, are you funding 100% of the project? And also, how do you approach the core costs, which is always a very, very big question for nonprofits, you know, who are often able to get grants for projects, but not necessarily, but finding it difficult to fund their core work, their sort of core operations.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also, I mean, one of the assessments we have made at the creation of the Alliance, that is important to fund the organization on core funding. So through this call, we propose both. It's really for the applicant to decide what they would like. So we can either provide project funding or core funding. For project funding, we can fund 100% of the project. We don't require co-funding for anyone else. And in project funding, we have also set a maximum of overhead cost at 20%. So that might also be, you know, an important information for applicants. Mm-hmm. And then if we look at core funding, so in core funding, you can basically ask for funding anything that you would like. So I don't know. It's usually cost that other funders or funders that fund only on project don't usually fund, or what we would consider overhead. So I don't know, the rent of the office, some trainings, the salary of core admin staff, or anything that you would like. And here, we don't expect to fund, 100% of an organization budget, but we don't have set a limit also of, the alliance should fund only 25% of your organizational budget. We don't have such requirement. Also because we want to support, small organization, and we understand that, the smaller your budget is, the higher the percentage of funding might be from a funder.
Okay, great. I'm just going to check whether there's any more questions from the viewers, but so far no. So I will continue with my questions, because it really strikes me with the story that you're building up here, which is really a quite new approach to funding organizations if we compare it to traditional philanthropy. And I know there has been recently different moves within philanthropy circles to experiment with these new approaches. And it seems to me that the Alliance is really one of these organizations who are trying something new. Can you tell me a little bit more about what is the thinking of the funders in this regard?
So we are donors collaborative. So everything that we do, donors have to come together and agree. So we work on consensus.
That's never easy.
And I think also to recap a bit on when the Alliance was created. It was created during COVID. And I think COVID was a big revealer of two things. So the gender inequalities that were already there in society. So, people realized much more the burden of care work falling mainly on women, the essential jobs that were in the care sectors, at the hospital, and that were also mostly performed by women, and also how domestic violence is widespread throughout the region. Some people say it has increased during COVID. I'm not sure. I think it was just much more revealed. So this was one thing, a big revealer of gender inequalities. And then also in the philanthropic sector, a realization that donors could fund organization differently. So they could adapt, they could answer to this emergency that was COVID, and everybody needed, to change their plans. They could...
Oh, you froze for me. I don't know if you froze for other viewers as well. Can someone please let me know in the chat if we are still with you, if you can still see us?
Yes, I'm back.
Oh, I think Nadège is back. Okay, perfect.
Sorry, I don't know where you lost me.
Connections. The mystery.
No, I'm asking where you lost me. What was I saying?
Where I lost you. Yes, Alexandra says we're frozen back. Okay, perfect. Let's take a step back to the point where you said there was more. There was a question, obviously, of whether there was more violence against women, or whether this was just revealed.
So there was this first thing that was we took out of COVID, which was the revealing of pre-existing gender inequalities, and the second thing was more in the philanthropic sector, because organizations had to adapt. So philanthropic organizations also realized that they could be more flexible with how they fund organization. So, providing core funding, be more flexible with the reporting, with all the administrative requirements, and with changing plans of organization that they are funding. So this is the context in which we were created. And so we wanted, to work with these realities and try to build a donors collaborative that would also be much more grounded in the realities that we are in. So as I was mentioning at the beginning, have streamlined processes in what we do, trying to really look at all of our processes, being, the selection processes or the partnership requirements, the reporting, the administrative things that we demand from organization, and to streamline them as much as possible. And also, I think another important aspect is the collaborative aspect. So we are donors collaborative. So obviously, foundations collaborate together, and we value collaboration. But we also want to facilitate collaboration between grantee partners. So I was mentioning it a bit before. We are experimenting a new capacity building program where we would really favor peer learning between the grantees that we support. And we would also like to enhance collaboration between funders and grantees. So to kind of being, the bridge between the donor side and the grantee side, especially for those small organizations that don't necessarily have access to the donor sector.
Okay. So this is really great. I have to say that we have been looking into funding women's projects, or we periodically look into funding women's projects. And I have to say that this really stands out because there is a fairly small percentage of philanthropic grants that go into capacity building. And here you are clearly wanting to enter a long-term partnership and not just fund a project, but actually build up the organization on the ground. So I have a couple of questions here that have come in. I'm going to start with this one. I suppose your grants can be combined with EU funding. What do you think about that?
Yes, sure. So as I mentioned, we don't request co-funding, but we can also be co-funding a project. The only thing is that your proposal need to match our selection criteria.
Yeah, and I think that what you talked about, sort of small frontline organizations don't often have the capacity that is required by the EU grants. So that could be a tricky marriage, but not impossible. I have another question from Anne. She's asking, what has Alliance already lined up for the future funding opportunities beyond the Economic Opportunities Fund? And what time frame for next calls and focus of topics have been already identified?
Yeah. So there's nothing very concrete yet. So as I was explaining, we've been created a year and a half ago, and since then we've been operating in a learning by doing approach, so very agile. And I mean, in our thinking, we will put out, of course, more call for proposal because this is really our core work. I think we will reasonably look at 2024 for the next call of proposal, the second part of 2024. And as I mentioned, we want to support, long-term structural issues around gender equality in Europe. So, of course, gender-based violence is one. We're also thinking, about exploring maybe more around the links between environmental issues and gender issues. But all of this, I mean, there's nothing very concrete or finalized yet. This is just some ideas floating.
Yeah, and obviously, as you mentioned, this is a collaborative. So I imagine that each funder, they bring their own approach, they bring their own perspective. And so there is a negotiation and compromise to be found. And I imagine this also takes a little bit of time. This is something behind the scenes that we don't see. Now, I also have a request from Anne again, who is asking about the slides. And the two visuals that we have shown, they come from the position paper of the Alliance. And if you go to the Alliance website and click on About and scroll a little bit down, you can see a link to download the position paper. And there you can find these visuals together with a little bit of textual explanation. I am giving you last chance to ask questions because Nadège and I have actually gone through everything that we have prepared so far. So we are nearing the end of this interview, and thank you so much for joining us. I also wanted to mention that for any organization looking to improve their capacity, whether it is in fundraising or in other aspects, please, I invite you to visit our website, activismincubator.eu/training, to see how we work to strengthen, equip, and support nonprofit organizations in being better at what they do and being better at delivering their mission. So, final chance to ask questions to Nadège. I just have a message from Anne who says, okay, perfect, very helpful. So glad to have this feedback as well. You wanted to say something? I know you first. Okay.
Hello again. Sorry, the internet has been very unreliable today. It's always at the worst time.
Yeah, no, it's always like that. But I think most people have been able to hear the information. And also, if I'm not wrong, you are running a second session on the 30th of January, right?
Yes, so you can also find more information. Maybe you can put out the link somewhere because I'm not sure I can do it. We have on our website, if you go to the news, we have a frequently asked question article where you can find already a lot of answers to questions you may ask yourself. And indeed, we are also organizing a Q&A webinar on January 30th, so it's already next week. And here the objective is really for applicants to come in and ask all of the questions they have on the call. And you can register for that on our website as well.
Okay, perfect. So if you are serious about applying for this amazing opportunity, for this amazing grant with an organization that not only wants to fund your project, but also wants to get into a true partnership with you and help you build your organizational capacity, which is very, very unique, do make sure that you are at that session. And we wish you all absolutely best of luck in writing winning applications. And we hope to see you at the next 2 fundraising conversations episodes. They are always on the third Tuesday of the month at 12:30. Next month, we will be talking about the IT tools that can support your fundraising efforts. So if you don't know what they are, please come. We will find this all out, and also how you can access pro bono support on that. And then in March, we are going to be talking in more details about the big question of core funding. So how to help fund your organization's main operations or core operations, and what are the major shifts in philanthropy regarding that topic. So we have Angelica saying to us, thank you to you both. Thank you, Angelica, Emily, and Alexandra, Maria, for being here live with us, for asking all your questions, and everyone else who hasn't asked questions, so I don't have their names in the chat. And thank you very much, Nadège, for giving us the insight into this wonderful work that the Alliance and all the 5 partners are doing.
Thank you for inviting me and organizing this fundraising conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.